So I'm going to get us started. Welcome to our new doctoral colloquium at noon on Fridays. This is an awesome sized group. I'm very excited to have you. So this month, I invited to join us Pam Stafford. Oh, we have another. Who is joining us from Institutional Review Board. And I know that this causes heart palpitations for many of us. And even though we do the trainings and we see what we're supposed to do, it's still kind of a scary process and uses a lot of words that like what like even seeing like protocol and informed consent, they're just like, what? In fact, Travis, why don't you just give us a little he's like, what? Travis just went through this process this summer. A few of you did, but I just want him to share just real quickly something about leading up to the process, what that was like and what you were thinking about as someone going through it.
Sure. So yes, at first it was very daunting, but I have to say, I do not currently have anything under review by IRB right now, but I will still say out loud that Pam is amazing. And I don't even need anything from her right at this moment. So, um, so yes, honestly, the best thing that I did was somehow I don't remember if the phone number came magically from someone else, but I called Pam and she talked me through it. And so I worked through two different submissions to IRB, and it takes time, but it does. The system works. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. So basically, if you're thinking of doing any surveys, any interviews, anything of the like for this project or another while you're working at a university or you're a student at a university, you need IRB. And so I've asked Pam to give us all the tips, all the things, all the insights that she can share about getting those types of documents ready. I'm going to turn it over to Pam so she can help us know what to do to have the easiest process.
Thank you. I did put together some slides, which I told Dr. Shane I have converted to a PDF, and she'll be able to distribute to you after the fact. That'll have some active links in there to some of the guidance documents and web pages we've been talking about. And it may not hit everything you're exactly wanting to know, so I have tried to allot some time at the end for additional questions, and I'm happy if we run out of time, like Travis did, hit me up. I mean, I don't technically do protocol review and management. I was covering while we had some staff changes, but I'm always available to you guys. So don't hesitate to reach out, and if need be, I might put you in touch with one of the folks who do handle the non-medical protocols right now. Let me go ahead and do this whole wonderful screen sharing thing and see if I can get it going. You should see a presentation coming up here momentarily. All right, are you seeing a big green screen? Oh yes, thumbs up, awesome. And I'm going to move you guys off over onto my other screen here. So I'm looking at the camera up here. I can't see you over here, but if you have a question as I'm coming up with something or going through a slide, please, I'm very informal. Just speak up, raise your hand. I may not see hands, or put it in the chat. However you guys want to do it. Dr. Shane, do you have a preference? Do you just want to hold everything to the end, or what do you think makes more sense?
You know what? We're pretty casual in this, and if you're okay with it, the students have a question as they're going along, I'm totally fine with them jumping in to ask the question. Yeah. And then we'll open it broadly for questions at the end.
Perfect. Yep. So if I say something, you're like, whoa, just shout at me. I'm totally cool with that. But yes, so I am here in the Office of Research Integrity. And I know that statement or that title, that probably doesn't mean much of anything. We do work with the IRB, but we're more of a middleman. So I'm going to kind of describe first what this office does and the purpose that it serves. Okay. So who we are at the ORI and what we do. We do promote the ethical conduct of research involving human subjects. We help facilitate that review process by serving as sort of the middleman, the conduit between the individuals who are performing the work and the IRBs who actually review the protocols. We also do provide education and consultation to both the investigators and IRB members. So we're kind of a do-it-all shop, so to speak. On that consultation end, that's kind of why I'm here today and what Travis was talking about a little bit. You may not be ready to submit something right now, but can you communicate with us about something you're thinking about doing to make sure you kind of have things lined up? And I'm going to say hardcore yes. And in fact, please do, because it will give you an advantage. There are a couple ways to do that. On our website, we have a consultation request. There's actually a little square that you click on that says request a one-on-one consult. It takes you right into a red cap form that gets submitted to our office. And then you're basically matched up with somebody who has experience and knowledge in the kind of research area that you are planning on doing. Again, we'll have this information linked for you in the slides afterwards. If you're not quite ready, or maybe that one-on-one thing feels a little intimidating, we do have something else called the ORI office hours, and that's more of a group setting, okay? And there are some upcoming dates there for you, and the links are going to be out on the side. It's always via Zoom. And that is just sort of anybody who's interested and have questions about the process, either whether they have a protocol or they're thinking about doing a protocol in the future, come, and it's just an open format to sort of, brainstorm and ask staff members questions. Along those lines, and much like Dr. Shane was talking about, is, each field has their own jargon and alphabet soup, right? And so I kind of want to go over some terminology, especially you guys doing dissertations, if you're applying for funding and federal sources and things like that. Not everybody, heaven forbid we be logical, but not everybody uses the same terms in the same way. Okay, so some people in funding agencies use the term IRB exemption. And that just, I hate to say it, does make me cringe a little bit, but they use that to refer to not having to submit a protocol to the IRB for review and approval. What I want you guys to know, and now you'll be some of the most informed folks on campus, is this is actually very misleading. Not that they're trying to mislead you, but they're using that term differently. Exemption actually is a type of IRB review and approval, okay? So what it is it stands for exemption certification, and it does require the investigator to submit a protocol application to the IRB for review and approval. The IRB reviews it and looks it over and determines if it meets the federal criteria for being exempt from the federal research regulations. So it's not exempt from IRB review, it's exempt from the federal regulations. However, key point, all ethical requirements still apply to that project, hence why a protocol is required, because we need to make sure that all ethical requirements are going to still be met. When they're saying IRB exemption, what they're actually meaning is something we call, and what is known as a not human research determination, or an NHR. I don't know if any of you have gone through that process, but we're going to talk about it a little briefly here. So how do I know whether I need an NHR determination or IRB review and approval, and who gets to make that decision? So here there is a process at UK for obtaining, and I want to emphasize, an official determination about whether a project requires IRB review and approval or not. Only authorized individuals on campus can make that determination. Researchers, faculty advisors, staff, and/or students cannot make that determination for themselves or others. The only ones who can are the IRB chairs or their designee, which is our executive director, Dr. Lake Bullock. Individuals should submit that not human research inquiry form. And so when you get these slides as a PDF, this right here is linked directly to that form for you in the event that you need that. It also linked on our website. And what that form does is it's in red cap, you describe what you're planning to do, and then you get an official determination from the staff who manage that. They're going to basically get it, screen it, see if any additional information may be needed. They're going to reach out to you via email to get that additional information, any attachments required, and then they send it to a reviewer. The reviewer makes one of three determinations. Either, yep, absolutely, it meets all of the criteria and you are granted or awarded an NHR determination, and that happens via email. Or the project does not meet the requirements for an NHR and will require prospective IRB review and approval. As a courtesy, that notification will guide you and give you a recommendation on which type of protocol needs to be submitted. So we don't just throw you to the wolves, but we let you know where your project seems to fit in the grand scheme of things. The other outcome, and we don't like to see this happen very often, and thankfully it is very rare, but that a project does not meet those NHR requirements, and they would require prospective IRB review and approval, but the investigator can't submit a protocol because they've already done all of the work. That's a problem, and we're going to talk about that. It's not us just being difficult, it's not the IRB reviewers being difficult, it's the federal regulations, okay? The IRB cannot provide retroactive approval for human subjects research activities. All approval must be obtained before the work is initiated, and that is stated by the regs. The reason is everything has to be determined in advance, that participant rights will be protected, that data will be secured in such and such manner. It all has to, we need to know what will be done, not how was it done. Why obtain an NHR determination if you don't think you need one? It can serve a couple purposes for you. It serves as documentation that you sought an official consultation and it was determined by an authorized reviewer that your project does not require submission to the IRB. And that documentation, so when you perhaps go to submit for publication, and an editor or a journal, somebody says, we need evidence of your IRB, send a copy of your IRB approval letter. And you're like, uh-oh, no, that's not a problem. You either had IRB approval or you have an official NHR determination that you show and that say, oh, okay, you didn't have to get approval. Great, no problem. So we do have some examples for you of projects that may, and I know you're like, oh, great, case by case, and there's the, it depends, but that really is the case for some of these. And we're going to go through it a little bit by step here. But some of the projects that we have seen in the past that do qualify for an NHR determination are things that focus on not people. So if it's not about whom, right? If the topic is focusing on business practices, teaching practices, state practices, policies, and/or regulations, it's not about people, it likely qualifies for an NHR determination. Case studies that involve, and there's a reason I have justifiably, 3 or fewer individuals. We did get a request a while back, last year or a couple years ago, where the student indicated that they wanted an NHR determination. They were going to be conducting interviews with individuals, but they were only going to be doing 3. And then if more than 3 people contacted this student, they were going to put them on a wait list and maybe talk to them later. That's not quite how it works. Don't fudge and adjust your sample size simply to qualify for an NHR. That's not really doing anyone any justice, and it's not fair to the individuals who might want to participate. But if it truly is like a single patient or single student or 3 or fewer, it could qualify for a case study NHR determination. Using publicly available and/or de-identified data or samples, I'm throwing that in there because you never know what you might obtain, but that could qualify for an NHR determination. Use and analysis of decedent data will absolutely qualify for an NHR determination because it has to be about a living individual. We'll talk about that in a moment when we look at the definitions. And then some class projects, and why I say some there is it really does depend on the purpose of that class project. If it's simply to learn how to do methodology, and that's the end of the story. Nothing else will be done with it. And what will be done with those findings, and that's it. I provide it to my professor, it's part of my grade, end of story, then yes, it likely could qualify for an NHR determination. If I think there's any kind of inkling that I might want to do something bigger, grander, or down the line with that information, I best cover myself and come in and do a protocol, because it then is extending into that generalizable scientific kind of content area. Some additional examples, again, some quality assurance and improvement projects, if there is already an established body of peer-reviewed literature on the topic, then it could be deemed not novel. Some oral history projects, and this is one that can get really, really tricky, and we love to help sort this out for faculty and students. This does seem to be a bit of an unknown. It depends on the focus and the purpose of that project, okay? And there is, what I want you guys to know, a major difference between oral history and oral history research. Oral history is focusing specifically on the individual about whom the information is collected, and it's not attempting in any way, shape, or form to extend that information to any other individuals or any other populations or groups. It's solely focused on the purpose of that one individual, and that is all. Oral history research differs because you are obtaining the information with the very purpose of drawing generalizations about that individual, similar individuals, and or the group that they may participate or be a member of. It's the goal of that, of an oral history research, is to attempt to understand the beliefs, the customs, the practices of maybe a certain group of individuals or a community or a culture. That's the difference. It's either on the individual without drawing generalizations, or it is drawing generalizations to attribute traits or talk about practices and beliefs and customs of a larger group. Oral history research requires IRB review and approval. Okay, it does not fall into that other category, so protocol is required. We do ask that students please submit an NHR determination request form to get an official and proper guidance about whether what they are doing qualifies as oral history or oral history research, because as you can see, one requires a protocol, the other one does not. ORI staff have been informed that there are some departments on campus that have been giving erroneous guidance on this because they do not know the subtleties. So please come seek guidance from us and submit one of those NHR forms rather than relying on other input, because you might accidentally get steered the wrong direction, perform a project, and when you should have had IRB approval and you did not have it in place. There is additional information about the differences between these two on a guidance document. And again, this link will be active for you in the PDF you get, but there is something that covers the types of activities that require IRB review. And then you'll have that, I believe, pages 6 and 7, somewhere around there is where it talks about the oral history versus oral history research. Projects that will require IRB review and approval, those that meet the federal definitions of both, and that's the kicker, right? If it's both definitions, then yes, a protocol is required. Human subject and research. And so we don't make these definitions up. It is federal regulations, and there's the link for you down there, or I should say the reference for you. It's 45 CFR 46102. A human subject by HHS standards is a living individual, and there's that part that I said earlier about whom. An investigator conducting research gets information through interacting or intervening with that person, and then uses, studies, or analyzes that info. Or if I'm not directly interacting, I obtain information about a living individual that is identifiable, and I then use, analyze, or study that information. If those things apply, then my project meets the definition of human subject. Research is considered a systematic investigation, and that is key. When a minute ago we talked about case studies of 3 or fewer individuals, that does not constitute a systematic investigation according to the federal guidelines or their guidance. So if it's more than 3, we are starting to delve into the territory of a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and even program evaluation that is designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. So again, not just this, but seeing how does it apply, bigger scope, bigger picture. So the kinds of things that are done, we have had some students and some faculty members who sometimes think, well, I'm just doing an online survey, that doesn't count. It does actually. Any survey, whether being done in person or online, that asks for information about the respondent and or other living individuals, it's a human subject, it's research. Interviews, again, either in person or even done via remote, via phone, via online, Zoom, however, that asks for information about the interviewee and or other living individuals, human subject, and research. Same thing with focus groups, regardless of the format. If we're asking information about those in attendance and or other living individuals, and then record or chart reviews, be it medical, educational, etc., if there is identifiable information in that chart or record. And then secondary analysis of existing identifiable information. So what you can see here is we're talking about all of these examples meet the definition of a human subject. They're living individuals about whom the information is and or it is identifiable information as well. Okay, cool. So I've now figured out I need IRB review and approval. How do I know what type of application? Because that's just a whole other daunting, endeavor. I'm here to help you with that. There are 3 different types. There is something we just talked about earlier called that exemption certification. And again, that is a type of protocol. There's also expedited review protocol. And then we have a full review, AKA convened, because they are reviewed at a convened meeting. So both the exemption certification and expedited applications are reviewed by a single qualified IRB member versus a whole committee, which is, you can tell that's where I'm going. Full review is reviewed by the entire committee at a convened meeting, and the investigator attends that meeting to have a discussion with the IRB and answer questions in real time. So I'm going to talk briefly about, well, how do I know if I can do exemption certification? There are 6 categories that the research project could fall into. 4 of those categories are probably typically going to apply to the kinds of research you may be doing. And it can involve more than one category. So it's not just one and done. It could have a couple different categories. Category 1 is looking at research that is being conducted in established or commonly accepted educational settings that specifically involve normal educational practices. This is very dumbed down and watered down. For more in-depth stuff, I would suggest doing a consultation with us, and we can kind of give you the more subtle nuances of each category. And there are tools available on our website as well. Category 2 then talks about when I start doing the interaction. So if I'm doing surveys, or I'm doing educational tests or interviews or focus groups, or I'm observing public, that then is interacting, and that could qualify for category 2 with some restrictions. Again, remember the federal regulations for research don't apply to exemption, but the ethical principles do. Because the federal regulations don't apply to exemption, some of these categories are not allowed if minors will be involved. Because, as you're probably very aware, minors, children, and some other populations are considered vulnerable populations, and they deserve and require additional oversight. If the research regs don't apply to a protocol, there are no other special protections for vulnerable populations. Therefore, vulnerable populations are typically omitted and not allowed under exemption protocols. Okay. Category 3 is new with the revised regs. It's called BBI, benign behavioral intervention. So again, category 2, no minors, no intervention. I'm simply handing something. I'm interacting, but I'm not intervening or manipulating anything. If I am, then I need to look at category 3. And that is obtaining information and conducting an intervention by getting verbal and or written responses from those who are in it, who agree in advance to an intervention component, and also if deception is involved, that they are aware that they can't be told everything up front. Again, children are not allowed in this category. And then category 4 is talking about secondary research with identifiable information that doesn't require informed consent. It's existing information or information that will be collected in the future for some other, not specific to this project, but some other primary purpose. If what I'm doing doesn't fit there, we kind of look at next step up. So we start at the bottom, path of least resistance, exemption certification. Oop, nope, doesn't qualify. Okay, what about expedited? So there are 7 categories for expedited research. 4 of those, which are probably going to apply to the types of projects you will be conducting. The first 3 categories are strictly clinical and medical in nature. It's talking about blood draws, devices, medical drugs, things that aren't going to apply to what you would be doing. And again, protocols can involve more than one category. A misnomer here, some people think, oh, I'm going to do expedited because it's faster. That's not necessarily the case. All that means is it's simply, once deemed ready, immediately sent to review rather than having to wait for a convened meeting agenda. Okay, so it's not faster, it's just fewer reviewers and goes straight to review rather than waiting for a convened meeting. Category 4 for those expedited review protocols is the collection of data through non-invasive routine procedures, mostly physical. Could be putting sensors to kind of gather motion, weighing individuals, some minor exercise and strength testing could qualify under category 4. Category 5 is the secondary research that have been or will be collected for research or non-research purposes. So that opens the door a little bit more compared to category 4 for exemption. Category 6 is just sort of a tag on if you're doing other things and you also plan to record any aspect of your research, then category 6 applies. But category 7 is the one you will probably become the most familiar with. Okay, that is basically the catch-all leftover of group or individual characteristics or behaviors. This is where all of your surveys, your interviews, your focus groups, your interventions, your observations, your program evaluation, QA/QI that is novel or oral history research, all of that is what falls under category 7. So again, the path of least resistance, right? Didn't qualify for exemption, doesn't quite fit everything perfectly into expedited. It doesn't mean I can't do the project. It just means I submit for full review. So there are no categories. If the research doesn't perfectly fit into either of those other 2 types, then this is your last option. It does not necessarily have to be greater than minimal risk to go full review. And in fact, we have had a total of, I think, maybe 1 research protocol from non-med side in the last couple of years that even are greater than minimal risk. It just doesn't happen. We have heard from some investigators, both students and faculty, that they prefer to submit full review because they found it more of an informational process for them, and they are able to talk to and communicate with the IRB in real time. And so it sort of sorted out those questions, got things answered quicker for them than it did via back and forth and written comments in the electronic system. If it does go full review, just want you to know that the non-medical board meets once per month on a Friday afternoon. It's typically, barring holidays or anything like that, the 2nd Friday of each month. So now we're going to kind of get into some of this nitty-gritty of preparing the application itself, right? You've gotten guidance, you figure out, okay, it doesn't qualify for an NHR. Now I think I know which type of protocol I need to submit. Now I got to get in there and actually start writing it. What it will ask you to do is identify in the very first screen whether you are doing an exemption certification, an expedited, or a full review. If exempt or expedited, it'll ask you to then choose which categories you believe your project falls under. The IRB makes the ultimate decision, but you get to identify for the IRB where you think on the spectrum your project falls. Work your way through the application section by section. You don't have to do it in order. If you want to go and you want to fill out what's called the research description, because that is sort of the catch-all, it's really where you're laying out all of the finer details of this is how I'm going to recruit, this is who my subject population is, this is what I'm going to do once I've consented them. Start there if you want. But all I do ask is once you've completed any particular section, please be sure to scroll down to the bottom of that page and hit that save button. If you don't and you veer away from that screen, it's not going to retain the information that you've put in there. Once you have saved, you're going to see on this over here in this little screenshot a bunch of blue check marks. When you start, they're going to look like little pencils first. So when that pencil converts to a blue check mark, you know that that section is now complete. I do want to let you know you're not completely on your own. There are templates for various kinds of informed consent processes that are available in EIRB. Over on the dashboard, there is an accessible thing called All Templates. When you open that, it will show you the various consent forms. Again, if you need guidance, hit us up. We'll point you in the right direction. Here's where we're going to get into some of these kind of things to keep in mind and helpful hints, okay? We do want you to know that you should have all of your materials, all your recruitment items, be that via email or verbal script, flyers, everything, all your consent forms, all of your surveys, all of your interview scripts, your interview questions should be finalized and uploaded into the application when you submit it. It needs to be complete. Clearly describe the project in each of those sections. Write everything as if you were just explaining to someone you met on the street corner at a stoplight, okay? Please don't make assumptions about what the ORI or IRB should know or understand. Sometimes we get protocols that have a lot of acronyms or field-specific jargon that, while odds are our reviewers and staff probably know them, it needs to be written in a way that anybody could understand this. Please simply do not copy and paste your dissertation proposal into the application sections. We have seen that done, and I just want to let you know it doesn't usually translate well, and usually is lacking some information specific and relevant to the IRB review process that may not necessarily be applicable to a dissertation proposal or what you would be presenting and describing for a committee. The application, I do need to let you know if it's not complete or it's determined not to be adequate or ready for IRB review, it will be returned to you in the system with some screening comments asking for clarification, asking for you to upload some other information to make certain things consistent. And then if it really looks like you may be struggling or could benefit from it, it could possibly offer to set up a one-on-one consultation with you to walk through the sections of the application. All IRB records, I know there's kind of a little bit of confusion about IRB records versus research data, retention requirements, it's all a blur. Your IRB records, which are your consent forms, your research materials, your approval letters, etc., must be retained by the investigator, which would be you guys, for at least 6 years after that protocol is closed. So in advance, be thinking about, once I'm done with all this, where am I going to store all of this? Because that is something that you're expected to describe in the protocol application. Similarly, so while that's your record, your data itself must also be retained by you for a minimum of 5 years after the publication of the results or the submission of the final report for the project. If there are maybe external requirements, such as a funding source, that say you have to keep it longer than 5 years, then of course that requirement would take precedent, but you do need to retain it. So again, as you're forming your protocol, think about, I'm going to have all this data. How am I going to maintain that? I would suggest encrypted flash drives or something of that sort, that you have it accessible, that is protected and can remain confidential in the event that it ends up in somebody else's hands. That policy for data retention and ownership is linked here for you. It's also available on our website. And we want you to know that we are here to help. That is what this office is designed to do. So if you have questions about this, or you're not sure what is an acceptable retention or storage method, hit us up. We will walk you through that. Okay, cool. So I'm about to submit. I've got this thing ready to go. What happens after that? There's just this black, mysterious, black hole over here, or red tape thing that I just submit to, and I just wait to hear what happens. No. I'm going to demystify that for you a little bit. So once you have fleshed everything out in your protocol application in the system, and you click that magical submit button after you routed it for signatures and everything, it lands in our dashboard. And so it lands in the dashboard of the non-medical IRB, and the staff pick one. I mean, it's assigned to either one of them on a rotating basis. So they see which of them it's been assigned to. They grab it, they screen that application. They are not making any official determinations. They are simply looking at it for completeness, for clarity of information, and basically, will an IRB member be able to look at this, understand what is being done, and make an official determination, okay? Once the application is complete and deemed ready for the IRB review, the ORI staff then assign it in the system to the reviewers, either that single reviewer for the exemption or expedited, or a convened meeting if it is a full review process. And then the IRB reviews the application. What can happen at that point is there are multiple outcomes. Either the IRB approves it outright, basically rubber stamp, like this is perfect, nothing needs to change, boom, approval issued. They may request some minor revisions, okay? I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not approving it. It's just like, I think I get it, but I need a little clarification here. I need to verify that this is my correct understanding on this aspect. And if so, the ORI staff member managing that protocol puts together a specific list of questions or revisions or whatever the IRB has asked for and sends that to the investigator in the system. If full review protocol, the IRB could request minor revisions, or they could request major revisions, which is called tabling the protocol. I know that sounds horrifying. It's really not, okay? I'm going to talk about the differences here in a little bit. But it just means that there's enough information not present that they can't quite make those determinations yet. They need some major work to be done first. So the difference between minor revisions, and again, we're talking revisions. These are the things the IRB is asking you for, not those initial ORI kind of cleanup screening comments. Minor revisions are things that are directive changes, which in the judgment of the IRB do not make substantial alteration in any kind of risks or processes or safety or rights and welfare. It's more like everything in the application is there. It just needs a little bit of spackle or duct tape or kind of touch-up paint to clean it up, to make it clear what is going to be happening. On the other side of the spectrum, if it needs more than a little bit of spackle or duct tape, we're talking about major revisions. So whereas minor revisions, the whole picture's there, just needs a little cleanup. For major revisions, that picture is missing some puzzle pieces. There's some holes in the picture. These are substantive clarifications and or information that are needed that directly relate to the research regulations that will allow the IRB reviewers to make that determination, okay? So it's either spackle or filling in a hole. Those are the two kind of categories of revisions. Protocols may be returned to investigator for various reasons. We already talked about the initial screening process, need to get some additional info before it goes to the IRB, or then the IRB reviews it and they have some additional questions. When an investigator gets a request from ORI staff during that initial screening process, they have 14 calendar days in the system to respond, okay? When you get IRB revisions, which again are different than screening comments, you have a little bit longer. The system allows for 21 calendar days to respond to those revisions if it's what's called an initial review or a new protocol, a modification request, also known as an MR, or a final review. If it is for an annual renewal process, then again, much like the screening comments, it's just 14 calendar days. Now, why are we talking about how many calendar days and what happens if I don't respond within there? The system itself triggers automated notifications to you via email. Okay, so if no response is received within the allotted programmed designated timeline, the system sends a reminder, a little nudge, like, hey, if you were planning on doing this, please do so soon. We do ask that you please respond to all ORI screening and revision requests as quickly as possible. That not only benefits us, but it benefits you, because then you aren't having major delays in getting, like, oh my gosh, it took me 3 months to get IRB review and approval. Well, but then when you look back at the timeline, 2 of those months, the protocol was sitting with the investigator because they didn't submit things back in a timely manner. We don't want to see that happen for you, okay? We do also ask that you please be patient with us. IRB reviewers are given 14 calendar days to review stuff once it's assigned to them. They are voluntary members who typically have full-time careers, most of them here at UK, and they are assigned multiple protocols to review. They don't necessarily only get one at a time. If something happens and you cannot respond within that timeline, it is not the end of the world, okay? We just ask that you contact us, hit us up, and let us know, I need a little bit more time. And we can put a note in the system so that if somebody sees it end up in the closeout dashboard, they aren't closing it out. They're aware that you're still needing a little more time to address everything that has been asked of you. I hinted at this already, but the amount of time it takes from when you click that submit button to when you have that ultimate approval does depend on multiple things. Number one, the completeness, and I hate to say, but honestly, the quality, like how clear is everything when the application hits the dashboard at initial submission. The cleaner, the more complete, the faster things are going to tend to go. The timeliness of when the investigator does respond to any screening request or IRB revisions, the sooner you get it back, the sooner we're going to keep pushing it on through, keeping it in motion for you. You do need to be aware, though, sometimes, because it is not within our control, but if cultural consultation and or verification of translated materials is needed, that can add on to the review time, because we do rely on independent consultants whom we don't have control over. We do ask that they do it within a certain time frame, but sometimes they don't always abide by that. We will nudge them. I don't want you to think that we just let it sit out there forever, but it can add to the review time. Please, 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 please allow yourself adequate time. Don't submit your application if you're like, okay, well, I've got to start everything in a couple weeks. You're not going to be very happy with probably that outcome. Given the review timelines we've talked about earlier, you know that that IRB member already has 14 calendar days. There's your 2 weeks. So we do suggest looking at giving yourself a timeline of 4 to 6 weeks in advance. I know that sounds like a lot, and I don't want you to think that it always takes that long, because it doesn't. It can happen sooner, but this seems to be a good average that works for most investigators. We do also courtesy notice, we're not trying to be hard noses, but protocol applications, to remain fair to all investigators, are screened and reviewed in the order they are received and in the order they hit the dashboard. We don't bump applications up in the queue because an investigator is in a rush. And I have to say, honestly, it's not the students who do this too much. We've had a few, but sometimes we get faculty members who do say, oh, I have a plane ticket. I've bought a plane ticket and I'm heading to such and such country in 7 days. I need this reviewed now. I'm sorry that we're not going to, put somebody else aside who got it in a timely manner because you didn't plan accordingly. But I do, with a caveat, there are sometimes federal funding award notifications that we can make case-by-case exceptions for, because there's this lovely thing that some of those called just in time that all of a sudden, and I feel horrible for you investigators. I don't know why they do this to you. Hey, you have to have IRB approval in 9 days. Oh my gosh, really? I don't know an institution out there that can actually do that. We have had, help make that happen before, but it's, so we can. If you have a just-in-time federal funding situation, please contact us and let us know something's going to be coming in. We can be on the lookout for it and work with you the best that we can. Okay. So what are some of the common things and or misperceptions, mistakes that we see with applications? I'm not picking on students. I'm just talking applications in general. You'd be maybe surprised with some of the things that come through from physicians on the medical side. So I'm not picking on any one population. This is just general things we've noticed across the board amongst all of our staff. Sometimes there is confusion about who can provide departmental authorization. That mostly gets tricky if my department chair also happens to be my dissertation advisor. We can't be signing in dual roles. They need to be signing as the advisor, and then somebody with appropriate equal authority within that department or an associate dean then needs to be the one who is not involved in the project providing that department authorization. If you have questions as you're getting ready to submit about who should be signing off, hit us up. We'll try to help identify those individuals for you. What constitutes as a true honest broker situation? And that applies more to the medical side, but sometimes on non-med side too, when you're looking at educational records, dates, and things like that from maybe grades. Who has the information? An honest broker is someone who has zero vested interest in the project itself. It's simply someone who has access to the info, agrees to strip it from all identifiers, and then send it on to you. It is not someone actively engaged in the research project or having a dual role. We hear this a lot. I'm just doing an online survey, so I'm not interacting with anyone for my research. Yeah, you are. Actually, an online survey is interacting with individuals. The protocol is not open to enrollment. I'm only doing a chart review. I'm only doing, educational record review. It's open to enrollment because each chart or educational record you're looking at is a person. I already have access to the information as part of my job. I'm a clinician in such and such clinic. I see this, that, so I can use it for my research. I don't have to get additional permission. Yeah, you do, actually. So this is where we have dual hats, and it can get really confusing. Just because I have access, legit access for one purpose, does not give me blanket access for research purposes. Research purposes are considered individual personal interests, and that differs from your professional responsibilities. I submitted an article for publication, and the editor asked me for evidence of IRB approval. How can I get approval for my project now? That kind of goes back to one of those things we were talking about earlier, like, should have had approval prospectively, and the IRB cannot provide retroactive approval of everything that's already been done. So the answer to that usually is, unfortunately, you cannot, unless you want to start over. I'll submit an expedited review application because I need to get approval quickly. We already kind of touched on that one. That's not how that works. Exempt means I don't have to get IRB approval. It does. It's an exemption certification. Exempt means exempt from the research regs, but not from ethical principles. Here's another one that we've seen, especially after things are approved, not realizing that any change made to the protocol whatsoever, a change in study personnel, change in title, a change to my materials, I need to add an additional survey question. It doesn't matter. Even if you deem it to be really minor and it's just a wording change, it has to be submitted to and approved by the IRB via a modification request before that change is implemented. Otherwise, we might be teetering on what's called a protocol violation, and I don't want to see you guys have to go down that path. not using the correct or stamped version of an approved consent or assent form. Well, it was approved, but I just used this non-stamped version. Nope. You got to make sure you use that stamped version, because what that does is with the stamp is on there, it ensures that the content is exactly what the IRB reviewed and approved. Something else that sometimes students and faculty are not as familiar with is that all participants also should have a copy of that consent form to keep for their records. So they're not signing it and handing it back to you. They're signing it and you're signing it, and then either a copy is made or you're both signing 2 copies. They have to have something as a reference. If later on, and they're like, who was that? I don't remember who that was. I did that thing for, I've got a question, or I'm not sure that I'm comfortable anymore. Who do I contact? They have to have all of that. That's part of the ethical principles and the rights, is they need to have all of the information handy to them. Confusion about what is identifiable versus de-identified. Again, this happens a little more on the medical side than it does on the non-med side, but it does still apply. Anything here in this list of 18 makes the data set automatically identifiable, okay? Some of the things that are going to catch you guys up are going to be zip code. If I've got a zip code or a city or a county name or something like that, anything smaller than state, data set is identifiable and it qualifies as a human subject. Email addresses, social security numbers, account numbers, MTurk worker IDs, things like that, everything makes it identifiable, okay? If you can see so if that doesn't apply directly, like you're getting it from somebody else, or if I'm going to go into a chart and get it, if you can see it when you go in, it's identifiable. It doesn't matter whether you're writing down the identifiers. If it's visible to you, it's identifiable. If you are working with somebody on your dissertation committee or on your research team, well, I don't have access to it, but my advisor does. And so my advisor is going to go in and get it all for me and then hand it over, and we're going to work on it together. No. If you're working with someone who has access, you are considered by default to also have direct access, and the information is then considered identifiable to you. If anyone on the research
question.
I'm sorry,
Question
go ahead.
about that, Pam.
Yeah.
Sorry. So is there any scenario then in which, like, you could have, a colleague of some, an advisor or some other collaborator, like, or some institution, like, de-identify data for you, like, and hand over de-identified versions of the data to you?
Absolutely, yes. And whenever possible, that would be the way to go, unless you have reason and you need those identifiers. Like maybe there is an identifier in there to match up this data set with this data set, so that, sometimes you need them. If you don't need them, then yeah. And that's where we get into that term I used earlier called an honest broker. Some other totally non-vested interest or other institution or somebody, I'm going to get this stuff from University of Tennessee. They're going to strip it of everything. I just want all of this other aggregate stuff. There's not going to be any way for me to identify anyone in it or re-identify, because they're not giving me a coding list. They're not giving me a master key, anything like that. Then yeah, it's not considered probably a human subject. And guess what? I'll do you one even better. You probably don't even need to submit a protocol, because it's likely going to qualify for an NHR determination because it's not identifiable information. So yeah, if you don't need identifiers, don't use them. I mean, that's sort of just a helpful tip for me. If you need them, and sometimes there's a valid reason, because you're getting this data set from this source, this data set from this source, but it has some of the same people, and you need to know who here versus who here, and then match up their two things. Hey, it's allowable. You just have to do a protocol. It may not qualify for NHR. But yes, excellent question. Thank you. It's very possible. And when you do it, it probably doesn't even need IRB review and approval. So we're kind of coming to the close here, but I do want to talk about submitting your application and doing some helpful tips to help you succeed, right? Know how long to allow for the review and approval. We talked about that. We do recommend 4 to 6 weeks whenever possible. We don't want to paint you into a corner. Make sure that you have clearly described in that application what you're doing in terms to somebody who's not in your field, would understand it, who you plan to do it with, how you plan to do it, and what you will use in order to do so. And when each of those components are going to take place. When am I going to recruit? How am I going to do that? Am I reaching out via email? Am I sending out, or am I going to classes and talking about this presentation, or giving a verbal presentation about the research to introduce it? When am I getting consent? Am I doing it in person? Am I doing it remotely? How will it be documented? Will it be documented? All of those things need to be spelled out. What will be done with what you get? Okay, so you've got it, you've got this data set. How long are you going to keep it? Where are you keeping it? How are you maintaining it? Are you encrypting it? All of that, again, needs to be spelled out. And then we do ask that you please carefully review that protocol and the attachments for inconsistencies. Sometimes, like, one thing may say, I'm going to get 50 people, but over here it says 100. Everything needs to be concise all the way through, please. Otherwise, it's going to come back and you'll have to do some initial cleanup. Confirm that you've attached all of your required documents. Proofread those documents to make sure information is relevant. You can sometimes tell individuals who've copied and pasted a consent form from somebody else, maybe another student or a faculty member, and then there's stuff in there and you know that they're conducting interviews and all this stuff, and all of a sudden there's this random thing about the online surveys and you're like, what surveys? Make sure you haven't accidentally left in something that pertained to some other project that doesn't really pertain to what you yourself will be doing. Verify that all individuals listed on the list of study personnel have completed all of their required trainings, that HSP that you guys have done and heard about. Same thing with the RCR. And then we actually have a submission checklist available to you. And again, this will be linked active for you in the PDF of these slides you receive. But on our Getting Started page, there is a step 4 that links the checklist for you. So basically, as you're getting ready to submit, you can just walk through each of those steps and check them off for yourself. Watch for email notifications from us. Sometimes it's automated, and so it's like one of those no reply email addresses. So check your junk folder, your spam folder, just in case. They don't usually go there, but sometimes they do. Make sure to when you open it, when you get it, and you open that all comments tab. So when it has come back to you with feedback or screening comments or IRB revisions, the comments tab is where the information most likely will be housed for you. Be sure to include, if you're revising consent documents, both a highlighted version of the changes and a clean version. The reason the IRB needs to see exactly what was changed, and then the clean version is what the system will put that stamp on. So there is a reason and a method to that madness. We don't want to be stamping highlighted tracked versions. It's just not cool. Be sure to scroll down and click save at the bottom of each of those pages. Like we said, if you start to type something, oh shoot, but what about, and you go away from that screen, you're sunk. You've lost anything that you've put into that page already. And just remember, I know it's daunting. We really are here to help. We are your friends. We want you to succeed, because when you succeed, we've kind of helped have a hand in something that is contributing to science, right? So it's a little rewarding for us too. It's not completely altruistic, but we don't be a stranger. Okay, reach out to us. That is what we're here for. And I've got these names for you, and they are linked when you get these in your PDF. But your new, we have had some staffing changes on non-med side. Some of you who joined early heard about that. We have individuals for you, and barring any changes, they are here to stay for a while. So it looks like Elisa Krill, Katie Gieske, and Kim Williams. Elisa and Katie handle the expedited and full review protocols, okay? Kim handles the non-medical exemption certifications. So if you think that you're going to be going down one of those paths, you want, hit them up, ask for a meeting, ask for a consult. They will be happy to, and if not, let me know, but they will be happy to meet with you and walk you through this process. Because when they do that, what we have found when we talk to people ahead of time, what ends up ultimately getting submitted is usually much better quality than somebody just trying to wing it on their own, right? Because it's a scary process. I've been a researcher. I've been an IRB member, and now I'm here. I've been on all sides of that table, so I know where you're coming from. We want to help. And with that said, I'm just going to say thank you for letting me come talk to you guys to walk you through some of these processes and to basically ask, is there anything I didn't touch on that I can help you with?
Well, let me say, Pam, that was amazing.
Thank
So
you.
much information.
It's a lot, I know. And that's why I'm gonna send you that PDF.
That's great. And I'll send it out, and I'll also put it on our student resources page, but that is really, really useful. I'm gonna just ask a question. We're just at time. So let me just ask this question, or actually just make a comment, because this is something I just ran into with Travis, and it didn't even occur to me to advise him in this way. Travis works at another university. He went through UK IRB, then sent out his work. And then his university was like, why didn't you go through IRB? So it totally, like, I missed it too, that he needed to talk to his local IRB to see, because, you know, so if you're doing a project with a faculty member at another university or something like that, you have to find out what those what the expectation is. So sometimes I've had it where I've worked on a joint project with someone at another university, and they said University of Kentucky's is fine. University of Kentucky typically doesn't accept the IRB from somebody else. You've got to do it both ways. So you need to ask those questions when another university is somehow involved, whether they're your employer or it's a joint research project with someone else.
I am going to type something into the chat window here that is a link to our Reliance page. So yes, that is exactly, we have a team here called the ORI Reliance team. Their whole purpose in life, or ORI life, is to help work out the nitty-gritty of who's the IRB of record, who's going to seed review. And like you were saying, yes, so if it involves an exemption certification protocol, UK IRB typically will not go into a reliance agreement unless it is an expedited or full review. So there are some restrictions on that. I went ahead, and anyone who wants to grab that, it's on our website as well. It's one of the little tabs across our welcome page, but it is the Reliance page that talks about some of those processes. Yes, that is absolutely crucial information.
That was a new one, so I just thought I'd share it. So we're 2 minutes over. Does anyone have any last questions for this group? And then of course you can meet with Pam individually about your project. All right. Well, it was awesome, Pam. I mean,
well,
truly,
thank you. I love doing it.
I took notes, and I'm going to put more information on our student site, and this was really great. And thank you so much for coming and speaking with the students today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm a nerd, and it's what I do. Matter of fact, I know this is being recorded and I don't care, but you know, the whole 45 CFR 46, the common rule of federal regulations, yeah, I'll brace yourself, but yeah. That is my level of insane dedication, but I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
That's the most. No wonder you're good, Pam.
Yeah,
I mean,
there you go. So, yep, I got it on me. So anyway, I just went ahead and sent that via email to you. Dr. Shane, you should have that PDF momentarily. And thank you all, guys. It was a pleasure. And yes, please don't be a stranger. We want you to succeed, because when you succeed, we succeed, and science gets promoted. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.